Welcome all. I hope all of you are enjoying the presentations today. Today, me and my team, we're going to talk about how NetPoint is being used in a multi-billion-dollar capital project portfolio. The agenda for the next hour, we're first going to do some team introductions. I'm going to talk a little bit about our client, Cargill, and then we're going to talk about how NetPoint is being used at Cargill. We're going to share some real-time examples of projects. And then towards the end, we're going to talk about some final thoughts and then the Q&A session. Team introduction. I'm going to start off with myself. My name is Reniz Musa. I am a senior director at PMA located in Chicago. I just celebrated my 10-year anniversary earlier this month. I have 15 years of experience overall in project controls. A majority of it is in the oil and gas sector and manufacturing sector. I am the client lead and I lead the team. I'm the client server and I lead the PMA team at Cargill. The presenters today, Alberto Martinez, my right-hand guy at Cargill. He manages multiple projects in the portfolio. Yvette Holloway, she joined our team a year and a half back. Yvette manages my mid-sized projects, which is typically in the range of $50 to $100 million. Archana Harikrishnan, project control specialist. She works on multiple projects as well and helps me out with a lot of ad hoc assignments. Vaishak Kerkeratta. Vaishak and I work on a major project in Cargill, and now he's managing a lot of projects on his own. Benjamin Solano. Ben is my rising star when it comes to BI work, and Ben also manages multiple projects in the portfolio. Lastly, Bashar Al-Sabai. Bashar manages an entire portfolio of small projects, and he's going to walk us through how NetPoint is being used in that portfolio. A little bit about the client. So Cargill is the largest privately owned organization in the United States. As you can see by some of the metrics here, they operate in about 70 countries. They've been around for more than 150 years, have 150,000 employees, and have an annual revenue close to about $130 billion every year. They proudly claim the fact that at least one thing we all consume on a daily basis comes from Cargill. A very popular example that I relate to is, the soft drinks we have from Pepsi and Coke. If you look at the ingredients, you'll notice things like fructose syrup and corn syrup. All that comes from Cargill. So in a nutshell, Cargill, what they do, they connect farmers to markets, they connect customers to ingredients, and they connect people and animals to food and beverage. There are multiple sectors, there are multiple enterprises at Cargill. The 4 sectors you see on your screen here, these are the enterprises we mostly work with. Starting with CAS, which stands for Agriculture Supply Chain. And then there's PHOEBE, Food Ingredients and Bioindustrial. ANH, Animal Nutrition and Health. And then Protein and Salt. Now, within each of these enterprises, there are some sub-sectors as well. And as you can see by the name, so for instance, Cargill Cocoa and Chocolate, that sector would deal with projects that manufacture products that's related to cocoa and chocolate. I want to talk a little bit about the North American Capability Center, which is basically the internal PMO at Cargill. So typically any project above the $10 million threshold is managed by the Capability Center. Any project in USA and Canada is being managed by them. Currently in their portfolio, they've got about more than 100 active projects with a combined capital budget of $5 billion. I want to talk a little bit about the project delivery process. So typically every project goes through these phase gates in its execution life cycle. It starts off with phase 1, where the commercial needs are looked at and they make a decision whether from a business perspective it is profitable to go ahead with the project, looking at IRR and things like that. Project controls is usually not involved in that phase. In phase 2, which is feasibility and development, they are primarily looking at what technology are we going to be using, where are we going to be building this, how big is this going to be, things like that. Phase 3 is where a lot of planning happens. A lot of basic design work is done. We finalize our process flow diagrams, our PNIDs, our general arrangement drawings. Basically, we do enough engineering to make sure we can come up with an accurate plus or minus 10% estimate. And then phase 4 is detail engineering, construction, commissioning, and startup, which is basically where the majority of our work happens. And then phase 5 is measure. We basically hand over the unit to operations and maintenance, and then they look for productivity and things like that, and make sure all the business objectives are met. So phase 1 and phase 5 project controls is not involved, but from 2 all the way through 4B, we are working with the team. Cargill has an NDA in place with PMA. They are very specific about sharing project related information to organizations outside Cargill. So in today's presentation, you'll notice my team is while they're going to show you real-time examples, we're not specifically going to talk about project specific data, things like what product is being manufactured from this project and things like that. The majority of the conversation is going to be about scheduling and NetPoint, and how we're using that on those projects. To demonstrate how serious they are when it comes to confidentiality, what you see on your screen is actually actual project names in our portfolio. So you can see some of them are popular characters and themes from the Marvel cinema universe. But I assure you, none of these names have anything to do with the actual product that's coming out. It's just that they want to make sure their competition does not realize what's coming up in the market. So they're very hush-hush about their projects. It's just not the Marvel portfolio. We've got some other names like Goldilocks and Queen and Milkshake and even Hot Stuff. I feel like at one point they're just lazy to come up with some good creative names. But these are the actual names of our projects in the portfolio. So to show you guys how big the portfolio is, so this is the Phoebe sector. The colors show you what phase it's in, and the size of those bubbles show you how big the project is, basically in terms of budget. So you can see here, Phoebe is definitely our biggest sector, and they are quite spread out in the Mideast and in the Midwest and in the East Coast. CAS and Animal Nutrition Health slightly smaller than Phoebe, but they've got big projects as well. They've got a couple of big projects in Canada. And Protein and Salt, it's more spread out, but lesser projects in this portfolio. So what is PMA scope at Cargill? We primarily provide project control services, which includes schedule management, cost management, and risk management. Now you can imagine an organization as big as Cargill has a lot of data. So we help them out with some data analytics. We try to translate the data into metrics and some meaningful results so that leaders can make good decisions out of the data coming from projects and portfolio and things like that. We also help out, our PMA marketing department helps them out with some graphical support. And even when it comes to system integration, the folks at the PMIS department helps out Cargill connecting data in the backend and things like that. This is the current team at Cargill. As you can see, a majority of the folks are in the Chicago office. We've got a couple of people from the Detroit office. Our Canada team is growing by the day. We've got about 6 people there. And then we hired our first FTE earlier this year from Peru. Cargill operates in 16 countries in Latin America, and we have plans to actively expand in LATAM in the coming months. But this in a nutshell is the current PMA team at Cargill. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Alberto Martinez, who's going to talk about how NetPoint is being used at Cargill.
Good morning, everyone. Before we start talking and showing exactly what we're doing at NetPoint, we actually need to talk about how we started. Because as we started getting involved with this client and understanding the processes, their strengths, etc., aside from the learning curve that is typically associated with this, we had another major problem, which was as we're starting our journey, COVID-19 hits is 2020, and every industry is impacted, and we're now seeing a magnitude of challenges. We are seeing supply chain disruptions, we are seeing labor and material shortages, we are seeing a demand for the increasing for health and safety processes. And on top of this, now we are juggling with a new type of work scheme, because whereas we were used to doing a presential model, now we were working on a remote model. And while all of this was happening, projects were still running. And because of this, planning still had to occur. And as an organization that was used to doing all of this in person, being in a single room with a Skype plan and everyone doing it together, all of the projects were starting to feel the absence of this exercise. And as we start getting involved, we quickly notice this. Take out our toolkit and we offered a suggestion. We said, let's use NetPoint. Because here we have a software that we were used to use and that we knew was able to tackle all of the challenges we were seeing. And most importantly, among all the challenges, we knew it was able to close out the gap that remote work was imposing on the teams. And as we start introducing NetPoint into Cargill, we very quickly start noticing how the client was getting to like it. And while to all of my team and everyone else that was part of PMA, this was not a surprise. Let's talk a little bit about why this change started to happen. And so really we need to answer a couple of questions here. Why NetPoint and what were the benefits of using it? And before we go through that, let me just tell you a brief anecdote from one of our very first IPSs, interactive planning sessions. Because as we start showing our screen, the project manager on this team says, I'm not sure about what we're seeing. And even after we explain everything that we're going to do, our methodology, our processes, our objectives, he was still unsure. However, as the session starts progressing and we're an hour in, he was already saying how much he was loving whatever he was looking on the screen. His exact words being, man, I love it when you're moving an activity and everything else moves along it. And that phrase was not only resonating with what he was saying, it was resonating with two more things. Number one, how the rest of the project team on that session was feeling, and with the benefits that the software was bringing. Because while a project team was used to asking all the schedulers to take all the updates, put them through the scheduling tool of record, and seeing the end result, right now everyone was seeing the engine working in real time. And they were still being part of the whole process from start to finish. And everyone was clearly visualizing what was happening. And let's look at what I have on the screen on the top. A planning session's objective is always to show the total scope for the project. And that is something that should always be achieved on any of them. However, what is the main driver for an activity? What is the main driver for the project? That is usually not as simple to be seen from the very get-go. It usually is seen after the scheduler takes out all the information and puts it through their particular software. So it's not always easy to distinguish what is happening. However, now everyone was looking at the screen and immediately grasping what was the overall critical part for the project, whether we had any impossible constraints, whether we were already late in ordering some equipment. Suddenly the whole team was on the same page regarding what the plan was and was understanding what the associated risks were. And the benefits were not only clear for the non-schedulers on the room, for us on the scheduling side. Instead of having to translate the bad calligraphy and everything else that can come with post-it notes, we now have a hassle-free way to simply import whatever was coming out from NetPoint into our tool of record. And as this was happening, well, planning sessions were still being successful. We were still being able to put the plan in execution. We were still being able to understand what everything was. And at the same time, the demand for the use of the software started to grow. And probably we just need to look at our process to understand this. Because soon after we complete a session, and we sent out a deliverable for everyone to be kept on the same page. And as soon as those project teams were able to see those outputs, well, more questions were arousing. They were saying, well, what else can we communicate? And what else can we use this for? Because they were seeing how simple they could use this to pass on information to all the stakeholders across their team. And so now, because we were asked to do more, as soon as we were done with the integrated planning session, we would start considering options around what the execution could be. And as soon as that was out of the way and the project approved, fully aligned with the drivers and the business case, we will baseline and create our starting point for any updates. And as the project itself was being executed, any delays, contingency consumption, needs for additional resources, etc., everything else still needed to be communicated. And because of this, NetPoint very quickly became a preferred tool to ship this. And all of a sudden, as we start integrating this with the project delivery process that Renis was talking about, well, to no one's surprise, it became a cycle. Because now every time we move phases, we needed to start all of this process again and again and again and again, this cycle continuing all the way until the project was closed out. And as the cycle went on, now we were being asked to do delay analysis, to do quick comparisons, to generate the easiest to read versions of the schedules that could go into anyone's desk for review and be understood. And because of this, we're making a big statement here, but NetPoint was here to stay. And this was not only because of the value it was selling for the general plan communication, but because with some creativity, we were using it to deliver the message around a wide array of applications. And while I can keep going around what a great job we're doing, I love patting my back. I think it is time to change the focus a little bit. Because from this point forward, actually, instead of telling us what we were telling you guys what we were doing, we're going to be showing you some of our case studies across all the things we have been talking about. And with that, Eduardo Holloway will be talking about summary schedules.
Thank you, Alberto. So as has been said, we have been providing Cargill, our clients, with summary schedules, which is one of the outputs from the planning sessions that we hold with the clients. Now, this is an example of what we produce for the clients. It's an example of a summary schedule. We try to ensure that we achieve all the activities or show the activities associated with the project on a summary schedule. This is an example, so you can see all the phases, which has all of the durations up front. We use LOEs to, we represent this with LOEs on the schedule. We have all the activities, we have the logic tied in here, so that, as Alberto had already said, when we move activities, when something moves on the schedule, the client can readily see and appreciate what's causing the move or what's driving the move. We try to ensure that these schedules are concise and visually compelling, and so that's why we have it summarized here. Not all our activities will fit into the summary schedule, but we ensure that we put in all of the significant activities on the schedule. So what you can see here is different activities in different phases for the client from start to completion, project completion. So so we have several schedules that we do provide to the client. This is an example of it. Another example will be that we'll show all of the milestones associated with the schedule. Typically, we put the milestones on top of the schedule so that the client can visually see and appreciate what is going on the schedule, the milestones that have to be achieved. We also ensure that if there are different scopes associated with the schedule, that we're able to show the different areas and different scope for the activities for the project. So for instance, we have projects that will have, say, about 3 different scopes within one. We try to ensure that all of the activities associated with that particular scope is embedded into the summary schedule. Now, these are the milestones, for instance, that we have for this particular project, visually shown here. Like I said, we try to keep them on top of the schedule, of the summary schedule, so that the clients can, see what milestones they have to achieve. This is another example of a summary schedule that we provide to the clients. Like I said earlier, it's broken down into different areas, different scope. It's also this particular schedule is very procurement heavy because the client was interested in seeing when equipment deliverables will happen on the schedule and the impact this will have on project delivery timelines. Like I said, we have split them into different areas so the client can appreciate it and it's visually compelling. And we have the equipment delivery timelines, like I had said, specific areas for each of the scopes, specific equipment deliveries, and the equipment list is also provided to the client. It just depending on we try to ensure that we tailor this to the client's needs. This is also another example of a summary project as well. This is showing all of the predecessors and successors. We have the floats, so the client can know how much time is required to complete each of the activities, something they really appreciate, the Cargill team really appreciates. And they're also interested in what the critical path is, what the impact on the critical path and in terms of project completion timeline is. It's something the team and the Cargill team is always wants to see. We indicate this with the red notes to indicate the critical path. Again, with the summary schedule, we'll try to ensure that it's a standard across all projects. And so we will have a footer for summary schedule. We'll also have the dates of last updates. And then we'll have a legend, which will be indicative of who's responsible for what. So anyone can pick up the schedule and look at the schedule and determine when engineering, for instance, or when drawings are going to be ready, or when, for instance, procurement is going to be ready, or when construction will be completed. Another thing we provide to our team, the Cargill team, is updates. So after we're done with providing the summary schedule, there are periodic updates that will happen. On the upper part of this schedule, we can see that we've used NetPoint to show from start to finish when delivery will happen. when piping will be done, and when, for instance, when there'll be commissioning, and of course, when projects will be completed. That's in the first part. So this may be a typical example of the products of the planning session. Now, the bottom part is when we have taken updates, and we can see that there's a change in the schedule. You can see that still delivery is happening 4-1 rather than 3-1, which was the original plan. And we can see that and also piping has also changed in terms of its duration from 110 days to 120 days. This has also impacted the project completion timeline. Now we can see what the impact is, and that's what we use a delay analysis for to show. We have 3 weeks delay in steel delivery, and you have about 2 weeks for piping. Now, this is a basis from which we'll go to the client and discuss project recovery plans with the team. But it's visually compelling to be able to determine how we can start recovering the schedule or shifting the schedule left. So as I said earlier, we have 3 weeks delay for steel delivery in the schedule I presented, and we have an increase in the piping duration as well. So total slippage on this schedule, we can see is 5 weeks. And like I said, it's a basis for discussing recovery procedures. We have, in presenting all our schedules of projects to and scheduling reports to Cargill, we have over 59 projects on NetPoint that we use NetPoint to communicate schedule timelines to the team. Now, aside the updates and aside the summary schedule, we also will, present what if schedules or what if analysis of the clients, the analysis as well to the clients. And for that, I will pass on to my colleague, Achana, who will discuss this better.
Good morning, everyone. Just as Evere was talking and showing us some glimpse of the summary schedule, I am here to talk about what else we do as part of our standard process. So as Alberto mentioned, our IPS session or the planning session is the first step in our process, and this is where we get most of the information on the project. The typical output from an IPS session is a tentative end date for the project. And in some cases, when we have the end date up on the screen in NetPoint, we can clearly understand that that is not what the team had in mind. We would then even for a schedule-driven or a cost-driven project, that would not be what they had anticipated. So this is where we come in looking for what ifs. We ask the team about opportunities for schedule acceleration. It can either be construction acceleration or early procurement, whatever it may be. In Cargill, usually the questions are around if bridge funding is something they can pursue to do early procurement, if early engineering is possible, if they have an ESP selected, and things as such. So the use case I have here right now is of a what if schedule we developed for a project in Cargill. You will see that in this case, the schedule on the top, that is the proposed schedule, has an earlier completion date as compared to the typical schedule at the bottom. Because in this case, the typical schedule at the bottom is the one that followed the typical Cargill project delivery process that Renus had talked about. So once during this IPS session, we completed the IPS session, we came up with the end date of October of 2023, and this was not what the team wanted it to be. So in this situation, we started asking them questions on what can be improved. For what we do for this is basically we just copy the schedule we had just developed into another NetPoint, and we start pulling things back. So in this particular schedule, we were looking at things that we can pull back, and early start of P&ID's development was something that the team thought they could achieve. In the typical Cargill project delivery process, P&IDs are developed in phase 3. For this one, for the what if, they thought they could achieve that in phase 2B. This allowed them to do early procurement of the long lead item. Another thing that we were that the team thought they could achieve was doing early IFCs. Again, in the typical Cargill process, IFCs are done in phase 4 after they have full funding for the project. For the what if here, they decided that they can do civil and structural IFCs early on. This allowed them to land on their feet in phase 4 and get started with construction as soon as possible. So just making these 2 changes in the schedule, you will see that we gained around 6 months in the schedule. The proposed schedule had an end date of April of 2023 against the October date we had for the schedule that followed the typical Cargill process. The next use case I have here is very similar to the first one. You will see that we have three options here. The option one or the base case is basically where they followed the typical Cargill process. We did everything according to the project delivery process, and we ended up with the end date of December of 2024. In option one here, we decided to do some early construction, and we also decided to reduce some time for the internal Cargill review process. You will see that we did gain few months with that. In option two, in addition to whatever changes we made in option one, we decided to do some early procurement and also reduce some of the durations which the team thought they could achieve. So you will see that in this case, in option one, we gained around 3 months of schedule, and in option two, we gained around 6 months. Something to note in this what if scenario is also that we actually wrote down whatever changes or assumptions we made in the options. So you'll see that we have written down the changes as well as the assumptions we made while doing this. This just made it really easy for the team to communicate to the stakeholders. They can just attach this in an email and send it, and the report is pretty much self-explanatory. So so far, whatever what ifs we have done with Cargill, we try to keep it in a one-page format so that it's just easier for the team to communicate and also do a one-to-one comparison between the activities. Next, I'll just pass the mic on to my colleague Vaishak, who will be talking about some creative solutions that we have done with Cargill.
Thanks, Archana. In continuation to what Archana talked about, another use case for NetPoint in Cargill project is to visually depict delay analysis. Delay analysis is the process of identifying and quantifying the causes of delay in a project, and it can be used to determine the impact of delay on the project schedule. Of the various methods that can be used for delay analysis, the most common one is to use a critical path method schedule. Once a CPM schedule has been created, delay analysis can be performed by identifying the activities that have been delayed and the reasons for those delays. The impact of delay can then be calculated by determining how much the delay has extended the project schedule and how much it has increased the project cost. NetPoint can be used to visualize delay analysis in several ways. For example, NetPoint can be used to create delay reports that shows the activities which are delayed, the causes for those delays, and the impact of those delays on the project schedule and budget. NetPoint can also be used to create delay diagrams that shows the critical path of a project and how it has been affected by delays. This information can be used to help project managers make decisions about how to mitigate the impact of delays. Now, let's look at a project example. What you see on the screen is a summary schedule that was developed for a Cargill project in May 2021. According to this schedule, the estimated project completion date was set for June 2023. This schedule was used as a baseline, and it serves as a reference for monitoring project progress periodically. Later, the business reviewed the project progress and they were caught by surprise. In October 2021, only 5 months after the schedule's implementation, the project completion date has moved out by 4 months to October 2023, owing to some delays. So, what happened here? The project manager and the team who are familiar with the day-to-day activities of the project are aware of the reasons for delays. However, they face difficulties in presenting the information in an organized and presentable format. This is where NetPoint proved to be helpful. Using NetPoint, we displayed the critical path of the baseline schedule along with the current schedule to compare and assess any delays. The analysis showed a 30-day delay in obtaining phase 3 funding, which was not anticipated, and it caused a 30-day pushback of the phase 3 start date. Additionally, there was a 10-day delay in issuing the purchase order to the tanks vendor. And upon receiving the tank vendor's drawing, the engineering team requested an extra 36 days to complete their work. Also, the team chose to include an extra 15-day period for funding approval in phase 4 based on the delayed approval of funding in phase 3. According to the initial schedule, acquiring phase 4 funding would be followed by the procurement of a civil contractor and the prompt commencement of construction. However, now with the funding approval expected towards the end of September and potentially a month's time to mobilize the civil contractor, construction work can only commence during the winter season. The first step in construction is to complete the foundation, and undertaking foundation work during the winter season is highly undesirable. Also, the next step after foundation is to install tanks, and it requires a railway track adjacent to the project site to be shut down. Obtaining approval for the shutdown can be a time-consuming process. Therefore, In order to mitigate the risk of delays in obtaining shutdown permissions and to minimize the potential impact of winter harsh conditions, the team opted for an early start on civil works. Instead of waiting for phase 4 funding to be approved, the team opted to request bridge funding to initiate early civil contractor procurement. Even though this early start will not shorten the overall project timeline, as they will still need to wait for the steel to arrive after placing the order once funding approval is secured. This is an example of a proactive measure taken to prevent schedule delays during the execution phase. In total, there were 91 days or 4 months of delays that impacted the project schedule. And as a result, the project completion date was pushed back to October 2023. Using NetPoint, we were able to summarize all of these delays and their impact on the project schedule in a concise one-page document. And this is how we use NetPoint in performing delay analysis in Cargill projects. Thank you, and I will now pass it over to Benjamin, who will talk a bit about random calls.
All right, thanks, Vaishek. Hi, everyone. My name is Ben Solano. I am a project control specialist here with PMA Consultants. And I use our NetPoint software for all of the same functions that you've already heard about here today, but for one additional function that I'm sure we're all familiar with, and that's those random calls that we get throughout a day. And that's the title of this section, is random calls. All right, so I'm going to tell you a little story here. I was working to support a project that was around $17 million out of a site in Middle America. And the project manager at the time called me up kind of out of the blue one afternoon, right before the workday was about to end. And we started talking about the project schedule that we had. And it turns out that there were at least 2 additional active projects at the site at the exact same time. So this project manager asked me, is it possible to overlay the summary schedule that we have for our project with the summary schedules for the 2 other active projects at this site, so that we can understand when the busiest times are at this specific location. They were trying to determine the possibility of sharing construction resources, and specifically if there was a possibility to share the construction management and safety and admin resources. So the intent here was to show how many construction folks would be on site at a time per project, so that the construction safety supervisor could staff accordingly. And now, obviously, that's a huge resource on a project of this size, and we're happy to help. But really, we were in luck because the 2 other projects at the site were also being controlled by PMA schedulers, whom you've already heard from today. Okay, so what did we do? We also have a call for the next day to talk about our schedules. We looked at the major milestone timelines and devised a plan of how we could turn all of our individual projects into this combined schedule that the project manager had requested. And that's what you see here on the screen now, are the 3 very complex schedules in NetPoint for our different projects that were all active at the same site. Now, these are all mid to later phase projects with a lot of detail, as you can see, and I can't go into too much here, but these were all created by 3 different project controllers sitting down with 3 different project managers and developing a plan that works for that project, which took many hours and days to develop. Okay, so we put the schedules through a blender and we workshopped them all at once in one document. We assigned one person to clean them up. We used one of my favorite NetPoint features. So in my opinion, one of the coolest features in NetPoint is that it allows for seamless copy and paste of schedule items between files. Sometimes I'll use the copy and paste between files feature if I have a new project that I'm building out. I don't want to start from scratch. You know, I might have a good design or a layout, and it's so convenient to just open up an old file and start with some of the old design that you've already built out, rather than starting from scratch. But anyway, I could literally copy and paste my schedule into Vaishek's schedule, and that's exactly what we did. We took all of our schedules into one sheet, started cleaning them up. Once we got done blending the schedules together, the next day after the request was made, we came up with something that looks like this. Okay, so looking at this schedule, it's very simple, but this is exactly what they were looking for. We took all 3 of our schedules, we split them out by project and listed out all the major construction activities and their timelines. With this, we're very easily able to see the busiest times of the year. So this was very easy to create. I mean, literally I copy and pasted all the construction and installation bars, the black bars that you see here, that were in our 3 different schedules, and we just split them up by lines, project lines. So we're able to return this schedule back to the project manager very quickly because of NetPoint's interface and functionality. When we showed this schedule to the project manager, it was exactly what she was looking for. So at this point, she was able to use the schedule to show the construction supervisor when the busiest times for construction are on this specific site across 3 different projects. The construction supervisor was then able to complete their objective of appropriately planning the staffing resources for this location. Okay, so that was one case. I'm going to give you another one, a short story here. Another random call comes in from a different project manager this time, who also had a fully fleshed out NetPoint summary schedule for the project, but the IPM at the time thought it was a little too heavy to present to high-level stakeholders. The IPM wanted to minimize the schedule to a point where we were tracking only the essential items. Okay, in her words, less is more for the people she was presenting to, which makes sense if you're not familiar with scheduling or making decisions, but you like to make decisions at a higher level, aren't necessarily interested in all the details. You may just want to see the highest level of a schedule. So we go back into brainstorm mode and we think, how can we make a visual out of this request using the NetPoint software, but only using symbols to make it very easy to read. And because of NetPoint's functionality, again, this was also not a very difficult task. So you can see here on the screen, we took their fully fleshed out NetPoint schedule. We created this summary schedule with breakouts by work packages. You can see identified on the left, and use the star symbol to indicate the milestone start dates. We also use shading here in this schedule to separate and clearly indicate where the work packages are. In this schedule, you can see the legend we have on the right-hand side. We also we have the light gray star as the early March milestone. The green star in June is the 324 audit milestone. In this schedule, we're tracking weekly against that 324 baseline milestone and any movement to any other milestones in the schedule. So these delays were affecting plant operations, and we wanted to make it extremely clear if anything started to move. So with this schedule, it was mission accomplished in the eyes of the project manager. They can now take this schedule and really give a high level, not super complex view of the project and show week to week if any of these milestones start to slip. So hopefully this gives you a good idea of how many ways we could use NetPoint. It's really a tool that allows you to be so creative in building out different schedules and different views, and gives you limitless ways to visualize a project. It's just about how creative you can be with the tool. And with that, I'm going to pass the baton over to Besher, who will give you some more examples of how he's used NetPoint.
Okay. All right. So my name is Bashir Osbi, and I am a senior associate at PMA. I've been working on the Cargill CAS portfolio since November 2021. And as Denise mentioned previously, CAS is one of the major Cargill sectors, and it is an abbreviation for Cargill Agricultural Supply Chain. Now, before talking about the portfolio itself, in Cargill, there are three main management groups. There's the Capability Center, and those are responsible for the larger scale projects. And then there's the Capital Excellence team. Those are responsible for the mid to small scale projects. And then finally, there's the operation team, and those are responsible for the daily tasks as well as the small scale projects. So whenever you hear us talking about CAS portfolio, we are referring to the CAS, Capital Excellence team. So some facts about the CAS portfolio. Right now, we are managing 30 active projects. In terms of location, they are spread in several states in USA and several provinces in Canada, as you can see here in the map. In terms of portfolio scale, we have surpassed the $200 million. And then for the small scale project, I have the smallest of my active portfolio is around 500,000, and the largest to be above 22 million. In terms of processes, so whenever a project manager approaches me for a new project, the very first question I say, hey, is this a CAS Capital Excellence project? If yes, then I ask him, hey, did you collect the Capital Excellence leadership listings? Use the PMA resource in your project? Then if yes, then we will go ahead and schedule our first MPEG session or the planning session, in which the result will be the summary schedule as well as the schedule options, and those were covered by my colleagues previously. Then, as we move along, when phase 4 approaches, which is the execution phase, we schedule what we call the interactive planning session, and then from here we will have the detailed schedules, in which we will use to feed our other tools and reports that we present to our client. So in the next slide, I'm going to present to you the interactive planning session. So as we mentioned previously, All right. So we are now in the execution phase. We have all the main contractors on board, as well as the suppliers we will call for an interactive plan session. Before we do the session, we ask for all the vendors to provide us with the list of activities. We will place them in the schedule. We will assign a color code for each vendor. And then during the session, you will hear someone say, hey, add an orange activity, for example, here, and someone will say, hey, add a black one here, and we shuffle things around until we come up with this result. Now we have the detailed schedule. We want to move to P6. So there are a couple steps that I like to do. Of course, there's the simple way of exporting the schedule and then importing to P6, but the result will be messy. So I do the following steps. The very first step is to define and assign the calendars. And it is much easier to do that using NetPoint rather than going to P6 and then go by each day, assign it to the working or non-working day. After that, we need to put in mind the behavior of P6, that every activity needs to be driven either by a logic, relationship, a lag. There's no, the P6 doesn't have the luxury of placing an activity on a specific date. Rather, we need also to assign the constraints. Once all that's done, the next step will be to create and assign the work breakdown structure. So we can do that by going to the tools, open codes manager, and there you have two options, the codes and WBS. When you hit the WBS, you will have those two windows. So on the upper one, this is where you start creating your work breakdown structure. So you can press add to add a new one, add a child to have a sub level. And if there's any mistake, you can click on that work breakdown structure, press on move. You'll have two options, whether to move it in or move it out a level. And then in the lower window, you will have a field for the assignment. Here you can assign the work for each activity at which WS goes to. And whenever you do that, you will have the activity highlighted at the background. Now, once we are done, there's an option here. Sorry, there's the viewing. There's the drop down option. So there's the assignment, and then the other one is called the roll up. Once you hit the roll up, you will have this view, in which it is an easier way to check for errors. And here you can add as much columns as you want. You can add the duration, start, finish date, still float, free float, and all the columns that you can think of. At the lower right corner, you will have an option to export this table to Excel. Once that's done, you can export to P6. So without following the steps, this is how the schedule will look like in P6 without doing any of those activities that we've done. And whenever you hit F9 or when you run the schedule, some of the activities that you did not add the constraint or you did not drive it by schedule by the proper relationship will go back to your data. Rather, if you follow the steps, this is the result will be. And finally, for the export to Excel, this is how it looks like. It is well organized. Activities are grouped and color coded, so it is much easier for the vendors that are not using any of the scheduling softwares. Now I pass it to Renice.
Thank you, Bashar. So moving on to final thoughts. When this idea first popped in my head to present in this year's conference, I thought we have to present as a team. And I'm sure now when you look at the breadth of work that we've done, you would agree with my assessment for having the team to present it. Because this has been a team, a lot of people come to me and ask, like, how do we grow so big in Cargill, so fast in Cargill? And my default answer has been, the team we have. Make no mistake, this is an A team that goes above and beyond expectations to make sure we meet all of the client's requirements and provide value-added services to the client. Even, I was pleasantly surprised at the pace at which we adopted NetPoint. If you just consider this presentation, we had 7 presenters. Three among us, me, Alberto, and Bashar, we've used NetPoint before Cargill, but the remaining 4, which is the majority here, their first assignment in PMA was Cargill, and the way they've adopted NetPoint tells me how much they believe in the software. It's not about just, hey, let's do on the schedule on the software. They realize how much this helps them in their daily work as a scheduled practitioner. And it gives me a lot of confidence, when they take on NetPoint and take it to the next level. Now, speaking about the client, to me, this is where the stars aligned, basically, because we were dealing with a client that was having issues with project scheduling, portfolio scheduling, trying to communicate to the stakeholders what the schedule was trying to say, even get some buy-in from leadership during the earlier phases. Now, have we resolved all their problems? Absolutely not. But we've made such a huge progress from where we started, thanks to the tools we have in place. And if you're thinking, well, it's just the PMA team that's using NetPoint in Cargill, that is not the case. NetPoint's popularity is increasing in Cargill as well. To the extent that today, if you have a Cargill laptop and you open the IT library and search for NetPoint, that software is going to pop up and it's going to enable you to start downloading the software into your system. I think in the last 6 months, we've given away 8 licenses for folks in US, Europe, LATAM. Once stakeholders see what NetPoint can do, there is this question as to why you're not using NetPoint, to the extent that others outside PMA is also using the software. And to me, that's not the message here. All the 10 years I've spent in PMA, I was not once involved in an assignment where I have to sell the software. All I do is I go in there, I do my regular work in NetPoint, and then I let the software talk for itself. And that's how I've done that in previous clients, and that's how it's happening in Cargill as well. So with that, we are moving to the final section, which is Q&A. I've noticed there are 4 questions in the chat right now.
Yes, we'd like me to read them off for you.
Sure, Brian.
Okay, so first one comes from Dinesh. It is there the ability to filter and just show selected activities, like only engineering or procurement activities?
Alberto, would you like to take that?
Sure. So we do have the ability to filter all of that as long as we specifically code it on the software. Not every project in NetPoint is coded this way, but it is certainly we are certainly able to do that. In fact, the reason we went when the weather was talking about it, she was showing the legend. Is sometimes we don't need to fully filter it out. We're simply showing it by the legend. We are giving an instant correlation in between what is engineering, what is procurement, what is construction, so that everyone seeing it, which is typically on a PDF format, can easily distinguish all of this.
But in terms of feature, it is the feature that is already exists that you can filter as much as you want in terms of the description of the activity itself, or there's multiple options to filter. Yes.
Thank you. Next question. This is, I appreciate that the PMA team is focused on standardizing reports for this client. Do you standardize on calendar days or workday durations?
So we are able to standardize the calendar, just depending on what calendar the team is running with. So you can have 5x10s, you can have 6x10s. Those calendars are, there's a feature for you to be able to standardize the or change the calendar as suited. The standardization comes from, what is the team working with? Are they doing 5x10s, or is a particular contractor running 24/7? So that will determine, how your calendar will be adjusted, but it's a feature that's available as well.
Okay, thank you. Next question. How do you make sure the project's stakeholders have 24/7 access to the most current NetPoint schedules?
I can take that question. So all our work is residing in the client's SharePoint site. Because we've got NetPoint on our Cargill laptops as well, all our work happens on their systems. So we've got a typical filing structure where it's easy for the PMs to go into their particular projects, and the latest schedule update is going to be there right up front, and then all our archive schedules is a separate folder. So because we all work in one SharePoint environment and we've got NetPoint in our Cargill laptops, it becomes very easy for the client to access the information. They're not waiting for us. I mean, we do send them emails every week. We do, if anyone asks, we can send them the information as well. But we've made that independent of us. If the project team wants to look at it, they have the ability to do that.
Nice. Okay, and this I think is our final question from John. Great job. I'm sorry, great job on this presentation, and the rigor of project controls for this client is great. Have you looked into how Project Summit may work into the mix in the future?
So
I have to explain what Project Summit is too.
do you want to explain Project Summit, Brian?
Well, so what I would say is please attend tomorrow morning's session. If you haven't seen previous conferences, it is our new software that summarizes schedules very, very easily. So that's a lot of what Renice's team is doing kind of on their own with NetPoint, which is you can do fairly easily with the examples they shared. But this kind of has its own algorithm and innovations that kind of does it for you with much bigger schedules.
Correct.
So yeah, you can add on to that if you want to.
Sure. So to answer John's question, we definitely have plans to explore Summit and use that for Cargill projects as well. Typically in our phase 4, we start getting schedules from outsiders like contractors and engineering firms. So at that point, there is a possibility for us to use Summit so that we can summarize the information as they provide us the P6 schedules, and stakeholders can see what the outside vendors are planning. Currently, we are doing that manually in NetPoint. We summarize it for them, but Summit could be a great prototype for us to try that, try to feature out when we get schedules from external parties.
Excellent, thank you. One more, this comes from Deborah Palmer. Does Cargill's contract with the contractor require the contractor to generate the project schedule, or is the contractor required contractually to accept the NetPoint schedule that is generated by PMA?
Great question. It's a mix of both, depending on the contracting strategy. But typically, what we do is, so let's say we're going from phase 3 to phase 4, we do a planning session towards the end of phase 3 so that we can baseline phase 4. That way, we as the project stakeholders know at what point are we planning to do foundation, steel, etc. Now, typically, Cargill does a design bid build approach, and we hire contractors by discipline, by trade. So in our schedule, we have time allotted for civil. And then when I'm engaging with the civil contractor, I understand where point A is, where point B is. And usually this information is passed on to the contractors during the bidding stage itself. But when they come on board, when we decide on a contractor, we ask a baseline from them as well. And at that point, we are making sure, we're not going to go to the means and methods and tell the contractor what he needs to do. We are going to make sure, we are defining the boundaries for him, A and B. How he goes from A to B, he's got to demonstrate to us that it makes sense, that there are no constructability issues, there are no safety issues, the resource loading makes sense. So it's up to the contractor to kind of demonstrate to us that all of this works well. But then at that point, we just make sure that he meets the dates that we've mentioned in our baseline. And if he goes beyond those dates, then we take that information to the project team, and then we review the information. There are instances where maybe the contractor had a better view on what the schedule needs to be than what the team thought it would be, or the other way around. We go back to the contractor and saying, you're taking way too much time here. Why can't you do it this way? So there is a back and forth at that point, but that is how we've typically managed our contractors.
Excellent, thank you. So that completes the questions.